So let's have a little fun with this. A guy sent me a tweet from a guy called Davis Orini, who you may or may not remember. Anyway, he says, "Oh my god, I didn't know Thunderfoot had a downfall, but it says so in this letter, so it must be true. Not a chance this baldy could make shit up." Now, just in case you don't know, people have been predicting my downfall for at least a decade. I mean, this one goes back to 2012, but this was back when people actually knew who I was and would, at every opportunity, people who didn't like me would drop my real name. Now it's out there so much it really doesn't make any difference. But before then, this was back when I was making the Why Do People Laugh at Creationist videos. There were these people who were absolutely certain that I was just some menial worker in a lab somewhere, that I was the guy who got everyone else the coffee, which was actually kind of fun because at the time I was working at Cornell and doing these collaborations with this nuclear reactor in France. But I couldn't say, well, I didn't even want to say anything at the time because why does any of that matter? But at the time, the main reason I didn't want all this to get out is I didn't want to give some credibility to all of these creationists by letting them know they were dealing with someone who had real credentials of one sort or another. Anyway, so it's this guy, Davis Orini, and he's written this blog. Davis Orini, for those of you who don't remember, was the guy who did the Sarkeesian Effector documentary and was famous for knowing all of the keyboard shortcuts, which he thought made him as good an editor as anyone in Hollywood or something. So let's take a look at his blog, shall we? So this is the bit where it comes on to me. The quote he played came from an attack video posted years ago by discredited scientist named Phil Mason. Phil Mason, known as Thunderfoot online, is a sad and lonely man who tries to alleviate his misery by attacking others. Initially, he started out attacking creationists and saw a great deal of success because they're not exactly hard to out-argue. Later on, he became political, raging against Anita Sarkeesian. This is an irony from the guy who wanted to make the documentary about her, whilst also raging against anyone on the right who supported him. What? Anyway, eventually he started attacking Elon Musk, which became his downfall. Yeah, apparently I've had a downfall somewhere, after Elon Musk invented the Hyperloop, and that went so well. Or he invented the underground, which no one had ever done before, or flying cars or whatever. Anyway, yeah, apparently that was my Ben Shapiro moment. As soon as he started going after real scientists and engineers, it became obvious he didn't know what he was talking about. So the reason this is kind of entertaining is because today I was looking over my publication record, which is not something I do very often because it's in the past. If you want to keep moving forward, doing something interesting. Anyway, there's this general metric that people want some metric to know whether you're a good scientist or a bad scientist and reduce it down to one number, which of course isn't possible. But, so there are various people who have tried this sort of thing. And you can go by the number of citations that people get, which, that's how many times people reference your work. Such that you can have a few papers with a gazillion citations. But that might not mean that you've actually been a very productive scientist. Or likewise, you could have gazillions of papers, but almost no one references them, which means you've been a very productive scientist working on something that's not terribly interesting. So there was this guy came up with the H-index, which is the maximum number of papers that you've got with more than that number in citations. So if you had, say, for instance, 30 papers, all of which had 30 or more citations, you would have an H-index of about 30. Now, it's actually quite difficult. I mean, just to get anything published at all in the peer-reviewed literature is an achievement. I mean, it's not diminished that. And to get anyone to cite it is also a big plus. You got to even if it's never cited, it can actually be quite useful to someone who's actually working on that. Anyway, so it turns out that my H-index is, I looked it up today, it's 29, but we'll call it 30 or something. And I'll come on to some of the shortcomings of the H-index in a second. But this is what Wiki has to say about it. 18 could mean full professorship, 15 to 20, fellow of the American Physical Society, 45, member of the Academy of Sciences. Hirsch estimated that after 20 years, a successful scientist would have an H-index of 20 and an outstanding of 40. So, I mean, these are just ballpark numbers, so there's all sorts of limitations on this. The first is people who publish in different fields tend to get different levels of citation. So if you want lots of citations, you go and work in a popular field like nano something or other or bio something or other. And people game the system. Once it becomes clear that people are going to use this to decide who they were going to hire and how much they were going to pay them and all that sort of thing, because it reduces it all down to a single value, there's an incentive for people to game the system. So people would publish lots of junk and cite their workloads just to sort of bump up their H-index. It's gaming the system and cheating. But then you get into the sort of stuff at the top level where you get people with H-indexes of 200, which is basically impossible, right? To get an H-index of 200, that means 200 papers, all of which have 200 or more citations. And this is, again, where the metric sort of peters out of utility, in that by the time you're up to this, there's no way what was your actual contribution in all of this? And typically, by the time you get up to these big professors, they just run an army of researchers, and they're sort of commanders in charge of the research lab, that sort of thing. So there is a distinct link, a lack of absolute utility in the H-index, but as a sort of general barometer, 30 is actually pretty decent. I didn't actually think mine was that high, but apparently it now is. But the reason I brought this up is one of the reasons I was looking over what I've done in the literature is because there are actually some fairly decent similarities to what goes on online. In that some of the videos that I've made, I put huge amounts of effort into, and these I regard as really some of the best stuff I've ever done. And this video in particular, Free Your Mind, this is where I, over the period of a whole night, did a time-lapse of Jupiter. So I sat there out on top of the mountain, and every 3 minutes I recorded some video of Jupiter, and I did that for 2 nights in a row. And then you do a load of processing. This is hours of work on top of actually sitting out in the middle of absolute middle of nowhere, getting the raw video. That's what the Earth was doing whilst I was recording this video. And the one where I got the decent images of Jupiter was that was the first night. I did it 2 nights in a row. Absolutely killed me. So when you're out on the wide open road, your body tends to sync up very strongly with the sun, such that when the sun goes down, you fall asleep. You just need to fall asleep. And so to stay up for the whole night like this was absolute torture. And also, backstory on this one, it was in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. And I was just looking around for a decent place where I might set up for the night to actually record the raw images. And I find this road, an absolutely superb road, into a forest in the middle of nowhere. And the only way I could actually rationalise that there was this good of a road into the middle of it was a dirt road, but it was an immaculately maintained dirt road, is that there was some military thing down the end of there. Anyway, I didn't make it down to the end. I made it to the first big clearing. which is where I set up this, and I froze my balls off that night getting this video. And that's actually a transit of IO going on there, and you'll see IO come out, and yeah, so huge amount of work, and it comes up with about 1/3 hits. Cool. And then I get this thing, which this was just some video I made on the fly in about, not quite 15 minutes, but I was off to do an experiment at a reactor, and I had some potassium-41, which I was going to do the experiment on, which is worth about $70 million per kilogram. So I just did a comparison with some other stuff. And so this video I made on the fly took, I don't know, maybe in total a couple of hours to make, and it pulls in 2.5 million hits. So there's just this weird non-linearity between, well, it's not non-linearity, it's quite often, if you put more effort into a video, it on average gets more views, but it's by no means a one-to-one correlation. And you know, when I take a look at my most highly cited papers, they are by no means the ones which I would say are either the best or the ones that I think made the most interesting discoveries. So, yeah, I actually went through and so rated all of my papers in how good I thought they were and how many citations they got. And whilst there was a correlation, it was pretty weak. So anyway, coming on to the downfall of Thunder, which is been forecast for well over a decade by people like Free Thought blogs, who now get, I think I pull in, I don't know, 3 million hits a month, something like that. Free Thought blogs, the entire of the website now is down to about 2.5, which is getting... Well, there's a reason why I've not mentioned it for a long time. Then you get on to Feminist Frequency, which is another order of magnitude down on that. And then you get to Davis Zorini website, which I decided I'd plug in here, and there's not even enough data to tell how many people visit it per month. Anyway, so that is the amazing new downfall of Thunderf00t.